All right, Shabbos, say good morning, a good tavach. Baruch Hashem, what a schus to be able to begin another week of Kiddushin together, beginning by thanking all of our sponsors, to thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Cheshvan, Shari and Sarah Wolaski in the schus of Refuah Shalema, for Zechariah Dov Ben Perel Shira. We also wish the Wolaskis a mazel tov on the birth of another grandson, Baruch Hashem in Eretz Yisrael, in Erev Shabbos Kodesh, mazel tov, or it might have been Shabbos already, in Eretz Yisrael, Baruch Hashem, mazel tov, shevi zocha le'achnisa b'viso she'aram avinu bizmano. So we also thank Stephen Tarizin for dedicating Ovid Sherman Drushos this month in memory of Steve's father, Bonim Tzvi Ben Chaim. Lay a soul as a schos refuah shalema for her daughter Ilana Bas Esther, and for refuah shalema for all of those wounded in Eretz Yisrael. Yonasan and Rachel Wolf for a complete and lasting refuah, for Rafael Yitzchak Baruch Ben Esther, and Azriel and Iris Miller in the schos of the Holy Soldiers of the IDF, and the merit of our brothers and sisters in Eretz Yisrael. Our week of learning sponsors, Robert Imas, in honor of the yahrzeit of his mother, Rus Bas Sora, and in appreciation for the entire Daf Yomi Shir. Another week of learning sponsor, again an anonymous sponsor in honor of Yoni Frager's birthday. Mamish, I don't know, this is like, apparently Yoni Frager and the Queen of England are two people who celebrate their birthdays for prolonged amounts of time. Baruch Hashem, this is the Jubilee year for Yoni. Baruch Hashem, incredible. All right, Javos, with that, let us begin. We have a lot to do today, Baruch Hashem. A lot to do today. Today's daf is Ayin. We are picking up in Mirat Hashem on the top, literally the first line of Ayin, Geri v'Charuri. So if you remember again yesterday, we started the very exciting parak of Asar Yochsin. And remember again, in Asar Yochsin, what we're primarily focused is on the 10 genealogical classes, and the idea that when Ezra came back to rebuild the second Beis HaMikdash, he took with him all of the people with genealogical issues. The logic behind that is he was concerned that if he left them behind in Bavel, what would end up happening? They would end up, quote-unquote, intermarrying with everyone else, causing profound genealogical issues. This way, if you brought them back to Eretz Yisrael with them, Eretz Yisrael had an established network of Batei Din, of courts, they had Rabbanim there, and Ezra himself would be able to oversee that these families, again, while functioning absolutely as part of the Jewish community, they would be care and concern over who they married. So the Gemara goes, we continue to go through this. Geri v'Charuri. So ultimately, again, Geri v'Charuri, from where do we know? From where do we know that these individuals ultimately, again, came out? So remember, Geri are converts, Charuri are emancipated slaves. So remember again, emancipated Eved Kenani becomes a Jew. So how do I know these groups? We know them. Amrav Chista Damakra, V'chala Nivdal Mitumas Goye Haaretz Alehem. Fine. Mamzerim also came Minalon, Dichsiv. It's actually very interesting. Vayishma Sanballat HaCharoni, V'tovia HaEved HaAmoni. So Pasuk says that this guy Sanballat HaCharoni, and Tovia, the Eved Hamoni, who was a slave, Uksiv, an emancipated slave, Kirabim beYehuda Ba'ali Shvua Lo. There are many people in Yehuda who were aligned with this guy Tovia. So the Gemara says, Ki Chasan Hu L'Shechanya ben Arach, because he was a son-in-law, ultimately again to Shechanya ben Arach, V'Yehochanan bino Lakach as Bas Meshulam ben Barachia, and his son, in other words, Tovia's son, Yehochanan, married another Jewish girl. The Gemara says, now this whole issue over here is this guy Tuvia was an Eved, an emancipated Eved, right? And halacha l'maisa, he went ahead and he had children. So the Gemara says, Kasavra Ovid Kochavim ve'Eved Haba al Bas Yisrael Havlad Mamzer. So the apparently opinion over here holds that an Ovid Kochavim, a non-Jew, or an Eved who has a child with a Jewish woman, the offspring of that union is a Mamzer. So therefore the assumption is over here that Tuvia, who was an Eved before he became Tuvia was an Eved, fathered children with a Jewish woman, and ultimately again the children were Mamzerim. Now they are included in the group that was coming up with Ezra. So from here you see that halacha l'maisa mamzerim came up also with Ezra. So Gemara says, one second. Hani chalman damar havlad mamzer. So first of all, not everybody holds that when an Eved has a child with a Jewish woman, that child becomes a mamzer. So that's number one. That particular point is subject to machlokes. So again, remember, you're basing this entire discussion over here over the fact that this guy Tovia had children with a Jewish woman, they're mamzerim, and they're included in the tally with Ezra. So first of all, it only works if you hold that a Jewish woman who has a child with an Eved is a mamzer. But what about if you hold the Vlad is kosher? First of all, how do you know those kids are from a Jewish woman? Maybe those kids aren't from a Jewish woman. In other words, we're from that they're from a Jewish woman. So the Gemara says furthermore, how do you know we had these kids in Bavel and they came to Eretz Yisrael? Tilma Hasam Havu. Maybe actually had these kids ultimately in Eretz Yisrael. So therefore, multiple questions on this proof. Therefore, the Gemara says you're right. But remember again, we're just trying to figure out. We're just constantly trying to prove how do we know these different classes came with Ezra? So right. So ultimately, again, so far we have Geri v'Charuri. Right. So again, converts and emancipated slaves. The Chalanivdal Mitumas Gares Alehem. Whoever was separated again from the impure classes ultimately came with Ezra. Now from Mamzerim, how do we know? So the Gemara says, the Gemara gives a different source. Ve'ela ha'olim mitel melach tel charsha kruv adon. Va'amru v'lo yochol hagid beis avosa v'zaram im mi'Yisrael. So Rabbi say, the Gemara here quotes the pasuk from Ezra, that's in Yisrael. Sorry. So listen to the way the pasuk reads. These are the people who came up with Ezra. Now presumably, these are places, these are locations. Tel Melach, Tel Charsha, Kruv Adon. Now, what was unique about all of the residents of all these places? They were unable to go ahead and say with any level of certainty that who their Beis Avosam, who their fathers from, what family did they come from, and whether or not they were truly part of Klal Yisrael. So this seems to be the indication. Now the Gemara is using this as a proof for Mamzerim, right? That ultimately Mamzerim came up. So again, in this grouping, you have these individuals who were unable to go ahead and ascertain the legitimacy of their familial lines. Okay, so we'll say now the Gemara darshans this pasuk. This is incredible. Now we'll say, here's the problem. What's the problem? The pasuk doesn't talk about mamzerim, right? Remember again, the pasuk talks about people who were unable to go ahead and say which family they came from, and if they were even from Klal Yisrael. Now, certainly a genealogical issue, but how is that mamzeros? So it's actually very interesting. Listen to this. So the Gemara says, you're right. These names of places are actually not names of places, but rather they're descriptive, ultimately again, of different genealogical issues. Watch this. Tel Melach. What does it mean, Tel Melach? What does that refer to? Elu b'nei Adam shedomim maseim lemaasei Sdom shenepcha letel Melach. The both say Tel Melach are people who came from families whose actions resembled the people of Sdom, and Sdom was turned into a pillar of salt. That was saying, what was unique about the people of Sdom? So Rashi says over here, Shahayim Megali Arayas. Remember, Sdom was known to be very immoral. So we'll say, who are the people who came from Tel Melach? These are the people who were the result of immoral unions, Mamzerim. It calls it Tel Melach because again, their genealogy resembled the behaviors of the people who lived in the place that was turned into salt, i.e. Sdom. I was saying this week's parsha. Incredible. Remember again, this week, Aaron Avinu argues for Sdom. Next, Tel Charsha. What's Charsha? So the Gemara says, Shekari Abba v'Imo Meshasko. So we'll say, remember again, this is, Tel Charsha refers, Cherish is like to silence. So this refers to people that when they start calling someone dad, their mother says, shh. That's a shtickle word, right? But that's not your father. Right? So we'll say, so Lamaisa, again, these are all talking about people whose genealogy ultimately is compromised. Next, and they were unable to say the house of their father, in other words, what family they come from, or whether or not they were even truly Jewish. Zehu asufi shene'asaf min hashuk. We both say this refers to the asufim. What's an asufi? Asufi is once a child that's abandoned. Now someone else, Baruch Hashem, collects the child. Right? So now the child is raised, but we don't know the origin of the child. That's an asufi. Shabbos says, that's actually incredible. So this pasuk, by the way, I just want to point out, the Gemara quoted this pasuk to prove that Mamzerim came up with Ezra. But in fact, if you look at this, the profundity of this pasuk, I will say is what? The profundity is that Lamaisa, everyone is included in this pasuk. In other words, you see from this one pasuk that everyone with some type of genealogical issue ultimately came up with Ezra. Incredible. And I will say, now the one part the Gemara didn't explain was Kruv Adon. What does that mean, Kruv Adon? I will say is incredible. So the Gemara says, Va'amar, Amrabi Avau, Amar Adon, the master said, Ani amarti Yisrael lefanei chashuvim kekruv. This is such a beautiful Gemara. So Kruv Adon Amar Va'amar, what does that mean? HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, I wanted Klal Yisrael to be as precious to me as the Kruvim. Remember again, the Kruvim are the two childlike images perched on top of the Aron, inside of the Holy of Holies, inside of the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Baruch Hu says, I wanted my children to be as precious as a Kruv. Veheim samu atzman kinamar, and they made themselves like a leopard. Yeah, both say apparently the leopard is incredibly immoral. Rashi says over here, kinamar. Well, first of all, look at kruv. Kidoshim kekruve hakodesh, kechayos hakodesh techsiv bei pnei hakruv. Kinamar kechayazu she'ena makpedes bezug chaverta. Apparently, again, the leopard mates with anyone. So I will say, so it's a little bit of a play on words over here. So the play on words is one second. Let me just. Yeah, so it's Kruv Adon V'imer. So the Gemara Darshan the Kruv Adon V'imer. So the Gemara Darshan the pasuk is HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, the Adon said, right, the Adon Imer, the Adon said, I wanted my children to be as holy as Kruvim. But what did my children do? The children became, it's a play on words of the V'imer, the Namar. Right? Ultimately, again, my children made themselves as depraved as the leopard. I will say it's such a profound pasuk, and it certainly resonates, especially in these parashios of Bereshis and Noach, where the most tragic element of these parashios is not simply, again, the loss of potential. It's the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself had such high expectations for us, right? Such great goals for us, and yet at the end of the day, we simply did not come through. There is nothing more profound, nothing more tragic. HaKadosh Baruch Hu sets us up for success, and yet again we squander the opportunity. Incredible. The Gemara gives Ikadami, another possibility is Amar Rabbi Avo, Amar Adon, the master said, so I like the second interpretation better. Right? The second interpretation is HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, even though, right, Amar Adon, right? So Amar Adon, even though you made yourself ultimately again like the Namar, like the leopard, even though you made yourself immoral, even though you squandered your opportunities, you did not live up to your potential, nevertheless, I still see you like the Kruvim. I still see like the Shabbat. So the beautiful part of our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I will say, is often in human relationships, we only see each other for what we are. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is able to see us for what we can become. And therefore, even in those most compromised moments where literally all I do is I look like a leopard. Like, in other words, I'm immoral, I'm doing negative things, not behaving, not living up to my potential, that Ribono Shel Olam sees the Kruv. He sees the cherub in me. I will say, isn't that absolutely beautiful? And by the way, they're both correct. Both drashas are correct. In other words, there is no greater pain in this universe than when we don't live up to our potential. And who does it pain more than anyone? The Ribono Shel Olam. He sees that I could be a kruv, but instead of behaving like a namar, like a leopard. But the other side is true also. Even when I behave like a namar, even when I'm just not living the life I need to be living, the Ribono Shel Olam still sees the kruv inside of me. That is the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is why tshuva is possible. Why is tshuva possible? Right? At the end of the day, the world works with a system of cause and effect. Try tshuva in any other area of life, right? You get a speeding ticket, you go ahead and you go to court, you say, you know what, I'm really sorry. I guess maybe if you get a very nice judge, maybe it could work, right? But Lamaisa doesn't work. There's cause and effect. Why does tshuva work? This is it. Because the Ribono Shel Olam sees the kruv inside of me that's still there, even when I've totally compromised my standing. Such an incredible Gemara. Let's go weiter. Amar Rabbi Arachana. Well, it's a very interesting Gemara here. These are all, the whole day is incredible Gemara. If a man marries a woman who is not fit for him, now what are we referring to over here? Now remember, we're talking about, again, genealogical. In other words, this is a shidduch Rabbosai that is genealogically inappropriate, right? So it's talking about, you might remember, we paskin that Kiddushin Tovsin b'chayvei lavin, right? We not like Rabbi Akiva. So if a man marries someone who is prohibited to him by a lav, the marriage works. Now again, it won't work obviously with an Isra Misa, Chiyav Kare. So a man tries to marry his sister, a man tries to marry another man's wife. Obviously that's gonna, but say again, a man wants to marry a mamzeres. Okay? Bad, right? You're not allowed to, but it works. A Kohen wants to marry a grusha. It works. These marriages work. So the Gemara says, any man who marries a woman, although the marriage works, she'ena hogenes lo, listen to this, ma'alava alava kasav kilu charsha l'chol ha'olam kulo v'zaro melach. It's as if he has gone ahead and literally plowed over the entire world, so ruined the world, and seeded the soil with salt. In other words, plowing over the entire world and destroying it is bad enough. When you seed the soil with salt, what do you do? You prevent anything from growing there afterwards. In incredible Shena Emar, the pasuk says, "Ve'ila ha'olim meital melach tel charsha." So the Gemara says, now the idea over here is, so I'll quote the pasuk, Shena Emar, "Ve'ila ha'olim meital melach." These are the people who came up from Tel Melach, in other words, Tel Charsha. So I'll say it's linking the two. So again, it's the opposite order, right? Those who went ahead and literally destroyed the world, plowed over the world, also put salt in the soil. I'll say the idea being that when a person marries someone who they're not supposed to marry, remember what it does is it corrupts the future familial lines of Klal Yisrael. So it's not just, so I'm saying, the incredible yesod is that sometimes in life we think that we're making decisions that just impact us, but they're not just impacting us. Often the decisions we make specifically in family life have a dramatic impact going forward, potentially for many generations. Amar Rav Ada Amarav. Kalanose ish l'shum mamon. That's incredible. Somebody marries for money. Havin lo banim shena mehuganim. He's going to have unworthy children. Shene Emar Ba'Shem Bagdu Ki Banim Zarim Yaladu. V'Shemar Tomar Mamon Palat. You'll say, okay, the kids will be unworthy. Hey, but at least they'll have money, right? In other words, okay, so kids don't, right? Kids, often you don't know how your kids are going to turn out. So, right, so at least they'll have money. So the Gemara says, Tamolomar Ata Yochlem Chadash Es Chalkehem. No, the money goes away also. V'Shemar Tomar Chalko V'lo Chalka. Maybe you'll say only your portion of the money goes away, but the wife's portion remains. Tamolomar Chalkehem. Ultimately, again, their portions. The Shemar Tomar Lizman Maruba. Maybe you'll say, okay, but maybe the money won't disappear for a long time. You'll be able to hold on to money for some point. Tamalomar Chadash or Chodesh. My mashma. How do we see this? Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Chodesh Nichnas, v'Chodesh Yetzei, u'Mamonam Avad. Ultimately, again, the month comes, the month goes, and all of the money is gone. So Rabbi says, so really an incredible idea. Now, I just want to point out, the actual taitcha of the pasuk is, Ba'Shem Bagdu, they rebelled against Hashem, Ki Banim Zorim Yaladu. They birthed foreign children, Ata Yochlem Chodesh Es Chalkeim. Therefore, again, the officers, Chodesh means the officers will consume their portion. So the Gemara is saying, so ultimately, so again, the Gemara's understanding over here, this refers to someone who goes ahead and marries for money. So number one result of marrying for money is unworthy offspring. That's the Banim Zarim, alien children. Not only that, but you lose all of your money as well. Not only that, but you lose all of your money ultimately, again, in a very short amount of time. I will say, just want to point out, at least the children piece, it's not a punishment, it's a cause and effect. It's a cause and effect. If at the end of the day you're the kind of person who marries for money, right? If that's your motivation, chances are you are not going to be a good and inspired parent. Because at the end of the day, your value system is fundamentally and totally warped. Well, if your value system is totally and fundamentally warped, then there's no way you're going to model the right values and right ideals for a child. So it's not a punishment. It's not a punishment. I mean, the second part is a punishment about losing your wealth. But the first part about a person who marries for money, having unworthy children, unfortunately, the children are just going to mirror your own value system. And being that your value system, in this case, ultimately is totally wrong. So chas v'shalom, unfortunately, that'll show up in the children as well. But I'll say also just an incredible yesod. How whether we recognize it or not, our value system is very clear to our children. Also, we mentioned this many times. It matters very little what you say to your children, right? 95% of the stuff you say to your kids is going to go in one ear and go out the other. Just think about what you remember, what your own parents said. Sometimes whatever you remember, my parents always used to say this, always used to say that. But you remember very little. Children remember very little of what their parents say, but remember virtually everything that their parents do. Your children will always remember how you acted under stress. Your parents will always remember if you argued with your spouse or not and how you argued with your spouse. Those are the things that they're always going to remember. Just like, again, they'll always remember. If you go to shul in the morning, they're always going to remember. If you go to shir, they're always going to remember what you spoke about at the Shabbos table. I'll say big things that we take for granted, but those are the things that our kids remember, right? The talk you had with your kid when you sat them down and like told them the business, they're like, is this over yet? Right? They're rolling their eyes, even if not literally rolling their eyes, metaphorically rolling their eyes. Those are not the lessons they're going to remember. But how you live your life, how you run your home, how you conduct yourself, those are the things absolutely they remember. I just want to point out even little things, and like today, if you're at the table and you're on your phone, if you're spending time with them and you're on your phone, if you're in shul and you're on your phone and your kids are next to you, I just want to understand what you're actively doing is diminishing the importance of tefillah in the eyes of your children. They're picking up, hey, dad's on the phone during Chazar Sashatz or during Kriyat Shema. It depends on the person, right? Again, dad's on the phone, right? It's got to be, I look up to my father's a good person, so if he's doing this, it must be fine. As I will say, every day, we convey chinuch lessons to our children through everything that we do. We have to be careful sometimes, and that's why sometimes even as a parent, you have to hold yourself to a higher standard when your kids are around. A lot of us have a double standard. There's a way that I live when my kids are watching, and there's a way that I live when my kids aren't watching. It's a little disingenuous, but it's okay. It's okay. It's good to hold oneself to that highest standard when the kids are watching, because that's where chinuch occurs. All right, well, says, go back to this. The Gemara says, the Gemara says, if a man marries a woman, ultimately, again, who's not, again, I will say, these are cases where there's flawed genealogical issues, but he marries her anyway. So what happens? Well, it's incredible. Eliyahu kofso, v'HaKadosh Baruch Hu rotso. We'll say this is wild. Eliyahu Hanavi ties him up, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu flogs him. That's what happens. The Gemara says, "V'tana al kulam Eliyahu kosi v'HaKadosh Baruch Hu chosim." In all these cases, ultimately, again, Eliyahu records what has happened over here, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu signs it. What is Eliyahu write? What does HaKadosh Baruch Hu sign? Oy lo leposel es zaro, ulepogim es mishpachto, ulenose isha she'ena hogenes lo. The Eliyahu kofso, the HaKadosh Baruch Hu wrote. So we'll say that's what's recorded in the document over here. That's literally what's written, right? That if you marry a woman who is not genealogically fit for you, and I will say, by the way, we're framing this in the man to the woman, but the truth is, remember again, it goes both ways. A man can't marry a woman who's genealogically unfit. And a woman, the issue, the severity is on both of them. So the Gemara says, not only does Eliyahu tie you up, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu flogs you, obviously metaphorically, but this whole transgression, this whole thing is recorded in a document. And I will say, now what's the pshat? What's the pshat with this? That Eliyahu Hanavi is, again, so we'll say, so just you plug in the case, whatever the case is, but Eliyahu Hanavi is tying me up, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is administering lashes. Let's just want to point out, it doesn't say that if a person eats non-kosher food, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Eliyahu is tying him up, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is flogging him. Person is Mechal Shabbos. Eliyahu is tying him up, and I don't know, it doesn't, you never find this by any other Aveira. And yet, again, over here, by marrying someone you're not supposed to marry, so Eliyahu Hanavi is involved, right? HaKadosh Baruch Hu is involved. What's the pshat? So as I saw an incredibly, incredibly beautiful idea brought down in the name of the Maggid of Mezrich. So I say, listen to this. He quotes over here the Gemara Maseches Avodah Zarah. Listen to this. The Gemara says, She'ein ben David ba ad sheyichlu kol haneshama shebaguf. So I say, the idea is, There's a chamber in Shamayim called the Guf. That's the name of the chamber. That chamber houses all of the souls. So Mashiach only comes when that chamber is emptied out and all of the souls are born into this world. That's the way that it works. So I will say, so the Maggid Mezrich quotes, based on the Mekubalim, he quotes that ultimately, again, those neshamas want to come into this world, but they only want to come, the Rebbe writes, into gufim tahorim, into pure bodies. What's the definition of a pure body? A child born of a halachically sanctioned union. So what happens? When a person ultimately marries someone who he's not supposed to, right? And therefore, halacha l'maisa, the neshama doesn't want to come down. The neshama doesn't want to come down. Because the neshama doesn't want to come down, therefore what happens? It delays the geula. So if you're delaying the geula, you know who gets involved? Eliyahu Hanavi. Because Eliyahu Hanavi, right? Hine anochi sholeach lochem. Eliyahu Hanavi is the one who announces the arrival of Mashiach. So if a person marries someone he's not supposed to marry, the neshama doesn't want to come out of the guf, out of the chamber of the guf. If the neshama doesn't come down, then the entire geula is delayed. And if the geula is late, Eliyahu Hanavi is upset, the Reibano Shel Olam is upset, and that's why everyone is getting involved. Incredible, incredible, incredible. So we'll say the Gemara goes right there. So the Gemara says, good. B'chala posel, puzzle. We'll say anyone who invalidates others, ultimately again is puzzle himself. We'll say, so we're going to see this. We're going to see this in just a little bit. Rashi says over here, kala posel megadef tavenes hamishpachos hu atzmo puzzle veinu adar b'shivcha li'olam in darko shel puzzle adar b'sh. Oh, sorry, let me finish. The kala posel puzzle. We'll say anyone who himself is genealogically invalidated often goes around invalidating others. And anyone who's constantly going around and invalidating others never sees anything good in this world. Now I will say there's a lot that's packed into this statement. So first of all, this concept that anyone who goes around genealogically invalidating other people himself is genealogically invalid. In other words, somebody who's always puzzling other people, usually himself has a psul. Which we know this. People who go around seeing the negative in everyone and everything generally are broken people. Your broken kite projects itself onto others, and so there's two parts over here. If you see that which is broken in every other person, generally you're broken yourself. And if you see everything that's broken in the world, generally, again, it's because you're broken as well. In other words, I will say, the Baal Shem Tov Kodesh writes this idea that the world is your mirror. The world is your mirror. Other people are your mirror. So whatever you see broken in someone else generally is a reflection of that which is broken in you. Anything you see broken in the world generally is reflective of that which is broken in us. Incredible yesod. So the Gemara goes down. Rabbi Shmuel Silber. But not only that, when a person is always invalidating others, so lemaisa again, lemaisa is very important. Lemaisa, the mum that they see in everyone else is generally the very mum that they see in this. I will say this is so important. You know, often in life we get angry at people because of things that they did, right, or ways in which they behave. And I will say when you see someone behave in an inappropriate way, it's important to kind of go ahead and take a step back, and to see if I'm saying this, is this reflective of something that's in me also? Reflective of something that's inside of me? Is there something else at play? Again, it doesn't absolve the other of the negative things that they have done, but lamaisa, to operate, like the Baal Shem Tov says, to operate with the yesod that the world is my mirror, and everything negative I see in someone else and in the world often could be a window into that which is broken inside of me. Okay, the Gemara goes weiter. Hogavra, a great story. Hogavra, there was a guy, that's his name, guy, right, from Narda, who came to the butcher shop in Pumpadisa. All right, so he lived in Narda, he came to the butcher Pumpadisa. Amar lahu, havilu bisra, walks up to the counter, he says, like to order some meat. Okay, so far so good. Amrlei natar ad shakel l'shamid Rabbi Yehuda bar Yecheskel v'nei sivlach. So the butcher said, no problem. There's one person in front of you, right? The shaliach of Rabbi Yehuda bar Yecheskel. So Rabbi Yehuda bar Yecheskel sent his shaliach, sent his guy to go ahead and purchase meat. So the butcher again, I will say, so far totally regular exchange, nothing special happening over here. Amar man Yehuda bar Sheviskel, the kadimli, the shakel min kamai. So the guy becomes incensed. He says, who is this guy? Yehuda ben Sheviskel. I will say it was Rabbi Yehuda ben Yecheskel. So this individual was disparaging Rabbi Yehuda, calling him Sheviskel. I will say, now what's Sheviskel? Sheviskel is a word that means a glutton. A glutton. So we're saying, who is this Yehuda ben Sheviskel who needs so much meat that I need to wait for his order to be filled? So pretty disparaging. The Gemara says, Azlu Amrulei Rabbi Yehuda. So they told Rabbi Yehuda what had happened. Remember again, it's Rabbi Yehuda bar Yecheskel told Rabbi Yehuda what had happened. Shamte. Rabbi Yehuda excommunicated the guy. Now I will say, now Amru. So I will say, so again, remember now, why does he excommunicate him? So ultimately, again, remember Rashi says there, Shamte ki de ashkechan deminadim, deminadim lekavod harav. So I will say, when someone disparages a Talmid Chacham, that often is grounds for excommunication. So therefore, Allah Chalamaisa, they excommunicated, Rabbi Yehuda excommunicated the guy. Okay, not only that, what happens? Amru, they said to him, Ragil Dikari Inshi Avdi. This guy, this same guy, he's always calling people Avadim. He's always calling everyone an Eved. So the Gemara says, Achriz Alei Avduhu. Not only that, Rabbi Yehuda had them announce that this guy is an Eved. Now, this goes back to what we just said before, that call a posel, b'mumo posel. If you go disparaging or disqualifying every people, generally, you're disqualifying people with the very thing through which you are disqualified. So now this guy is excommunicated, and Rabbi Yehuda announced about him that he's an Eved. Since he goes around going ahead and announcing everyone else is Eved. So we'll say, so what happened? Now, obviously, this guy, Azal Hahu Azamne Ledina Lekamed Rab Nachman. So this guy, we'll call him the guy, summoned Rabbi Yehuda bar Yecheskel to a din Torah in front of Rav Nachman. Rabbi say, what was the din Torah? What was it? It was a defamation suit. It was a defamation suit, right? First of all, you excommunicated me. Now you call me an Eved. So he calls him to a din Torah before Rav Nachman. Okay, so now I see Piska Dazmana. Also Rabbi Yehuda Kamed Rav Huna. So now watch this. Rabbi Yehuda, remember, Rabbi Yehuda bar Yecheskel, who was summoned to Beis Din, brings the Hazmana, brings the summons to Rav Huna. And Rabbi Yehuda says like this, Amrlei, Ezel or lo Ezel? Do I have to show up for this Hazmana? So Rabbi Yehuda was asking, do I have to show up to the Beis Din of Rav Nachman or not? So Rav Huna responded, Amrlei, Mezel lo mi bailach lemezel, mishum de gavra rabbaat. Now I will say, the truth is, Rabbi Yehuda was a higher ranking sage than Rav Nachman. So technically speaking, he did not have to show up at the Beis Din of Rav Nachman. That's the way this works. If you're going to summon a Rav, you're going to summon, right, a Gadol to a Beis Din. You can, but it has to be a Beis Din then of higher standing than him. So Rav Huna says to Rabbi Yehuda, technically speaking, you don't have to answer the Hazmana. However, Elamishum Yikra de Benesiya Kumzio. Rav Nachman Rabbosai was the son-in-law of the Reish Galusa, the head of Babylonian Jewry, and therefore, again, it's a good idea to go. It's a good idea to go. I'll cover to the Reish Galusa. Fine. So therefore, again, Rabbosai, Rav Yehuda bar Yecheskel is going to show up at the Beis Din of Rav Nachman. So Asa Ashkechei, so Rav Yehuda shows up, right? And what happens before he gets to Beis Din? Ashkechei de Ka'av and Micah. So what happens? He finds Rav Nachman constructing a fence. Amar Lei, so he says to Rav Nachman, this is Rav Yehuda bar Yecheskel says to Rav Nachman. Remember again, Rav Yehuda has been summoned to the Beis Din of Rav Nachman. So Rav Yehuda shows up, he sees Rav Nachman doing labor. Amar Lei lo savar lei mar lahadam Rav Huna bar Idi Amar Shmuel. Kevan shenismana adam parnas ala tzibor. Asr ba'asiyas malacha b'fnei shlosha. I will say, once a person is appointed to a leadership position in the community, they're not supposed to do any type of physical labor in the presence of three people. The Rebbe says it's considered to be demeaning for a leader to do menial labor. I tried this with my wife once. Right? It didn't work. Right? So the Maisa, she told me I'm not so important. So the Gemara says, Amrlei, So the Gemara says, Amarle Purta digundraisahu dekavino. So Rav Nachman said, it's only a little bit of work. In other words, essentially he said, I'm only repairing a little piece of the fence. Amarle. So listen to this. Rabbi says, so here's the chap. So now there's two things happening over here. So first of all, you're going to see in this exchange, what is really happening over here is Rabbi Yehuda is showing Rav Nachman that he was really out of his lane by summoning Rabbi Yehuda bar Yecheskel to his Beis Din. So the way he does that, that's the point. You're going to see a series of pieces in this exchange. So first of all, he says, Rav Nachman, why are you doing labor? Why are you doing work? You're a leader. You're a leader, and a leader is not supposed to do work publicly. To which Rav Nachman responds, I'm only repairing a very small part of the fence. Now he called the fence the Gunderaisa. So the Gemara says, Amalei, Misanya Make Dechsiv Ba'araisa O Mechitza Dam Rabbanon. Why are you using that word for a fence? You're a leader. You're a Talmid Chacham. Either use the biblical word of Ma'akeh or use the rabbinic word of Mechitza. What's Gunderisa? So Amalei, Yasiv Mar Akartifa. Akarfita. So Rabbi Yehuda bar Yecheskel says, fine, Rav Nachman, would you like to sit down for a little bit on the karfita? And a karfita is a bench. So Amrle umisani saf soldam rabbanon o itztava da amri inshi. Why using that word? Why don't you speak in the proper way, either safsal or itztava? Okay, Amrle lechol mar esronga. Would you like a little piece of esronga, which is esrog? Esrog. Amrle hachi Rabbi Shmuel kol omer esronga tilsa beramas rucha. Whoever says the word esronga, that is a sign of arrogance. O esrog kidikayi rabbanon, o esroga da amr inshi. Either call it an esrog or an esroga. Amrle lishti man imbiga. Would you like a drink of imbiga? Amrle misani ispargus kabi rabbanon, o impak da amr inshi. Either call it asparagus like the rabbis call it, or impak that people call it. So I'll say, so again, see Rav Yehuda bar Yecheskel giving Rav Nachman a bit of a hard time, showing Rav Nachman you don't even speak the right way, right? Your word choices aren't correct and not befitting someone. I was supposed to say, what Rav Yehuda bar Yecheskel is also trying to highlight over here is that when a person is in a leadership position, it demands of them to talk a certain way. You conduct yourself a certain way, behave yourself a certain way, and you talk a certain way. Amarle, Tisi Donag Tashkin. So Rav Nachman says to Rabbi Yehuda bar Yecheskel, let my daughter Donag go ahead and bring us something to drink. Amarle Hachi Amar Shmuel, Mishtamshin Bi'isha. Right? You're not allowed to use a woman. It's not appropriate. It's not appropriate for a woman to serve a man, right? Again, just inappropriate. So Rav Nachman says, don't worry. Kitanahi, she's a young girl. Shmuel said explicitly, you do not make use of a woman, whether she's an adult or whether she's a minor, whether she's a child. There's a certain level of appropriateness and sneers. So fine. Nishte lemar shama. Liolsa. So I will say. So Rav Nachman says to Rabbi Yehuda bar Yecheskel, would you like to send regards to my wife Yolsa? Yolsa was Rav Nachman's wife. Do you want to send regards? Amalei Hachi Amar Shmuel Kol Bi'isha Erva. No, I can't talk to your wife because if she talks to me, it's Kol Isha. Now I will say, now obviously again, we're not getting into like halacha l'maaseh. Obviously, it's not kol isha to speak to a woman. But if you look at Rashi says kol b'isha, last line, shneimar hishmiani es kolech v'im eshal b'shlama tishiveni. So I will say, so it could be that Rav Yehuda bar Yecheskel actually held that the voice of a woman is kol isha. It seemed to be a little bit impossible. It would seem to be over here more. He's trying to give Rav Nachman just a hard time, right? And he's trying to show Rav Nachman just in a nuanced way that halacha. Well, not such a nuanced way, right? That he's out of his league. He's out of his league, and ultimately, again, it was an overreach and an overstep and inappropriate for him to be mazmin, for him to ultimately. But I'll say, you know, it'd be like imagine for a moment, like right on Erev Rosh Hashanah, you have your Hataras Nadarim Beis Din, right? You got your three guys. You're feeling pretty good about yourself, right? You've just released a whole bunch of people from Nadarim, so you're like, does anyone have any other cases they would like to bring before this illustrious Beis Din over here, right? And you start being mazmin people, right? So there's a seder, there's an order, and great people have to go ahead and be treated in a certain way. So Rabbi Yehuda, to be clear, Rabbi Yehuda bar Yecheskel is not above the law. No one is above the law. But when you're going to go ahead and summon someone to Beis Din, and they are one of the Gidolei Hadar, there's a mechanism for that. And this wasn't it. So again, so Rav Nachman says, okay, if you want, you can send regards to my wife through a shaliach. I'm happy to convey your greetings to her. Ultimately, again, you just can't go ahead and inquire about the welfare of a woman. They both say, what does this mean? In general, there's a concept that a person is not supposed to just be chatty about someone else's wife. That's the idea over here, that there's a certain modicum of tznius when it comes to someone else's wife, that even just inquiring about the welfare may be a breach in tznius. And obviously, a lot of this is also societal, right? It's also societal. I don't think today, and anyone who's here speaking with someone, and you say, please send my best to your wife, or how is your wife doing, that wouldn't be a breach of tznius. But again, I will say, there's a sensitivity. There's always, in general, there's always a sensitivity for how, again, we deal with mingling between the genders. I will say, person has to be careful, and a person has to set up giddarim, and a person has to have a level of awareness, because we know, unfortunately, it happens all the time, where even, again, things that start out as innocent could very easily descend into the realm of inappropriate. So therefore, again, there are giddarim. Ultimately, again, there are boundaries. So the Gemara says, "Ay de bailo." So Amar lei Haki Amar Shmuel in Sholem b'Shalom Isha Klal. Again, in general, don't inquire about the welfare of someone else's wife. The idea is also so once again, Rav Yehuda Bar Cheskel is being a bit more stark over here in order to convey a point. But I will say, but this is important. This is very important about the way we interact with the opposite sex. There always have to be giddarim. There always has to be a certain framework of Kiddushin and Tara. So the Gemara says as follows. The Gemara says, good. So Shalchai Divis. Now watch this. Now apparently Yolsa, Rav Nachman's wife, was hearing this whole thing. So she says to him. So Yolsa calls Rav Nachman to the side, and she says, "Sharli Tagre Delo Nishvach Kishar Amaretz." Get rid of this guy. In other words, whatever he came to you for, right? Deal with it. She's saying to Rav Nachman, deal with it, because obviously, he's whatever's going on over here, he's intent on making you look foolish. So ask him why he's here, deal with it, and then send him on his way. He'll say, by the way, the power of a good wife. Right? See, because apparently, again, Rav Nachman was just going to be like whatever. So we'll say sometimes a man doesn't realize that sometimes a wife will say something upsetting or offensive, and a husband will get upset or offended. But in a good marriage, sometimes it's important to understand that even when a wife says something that's upsetting or offensive, sometimes what she's really doing is looking out for my own good. And sometimes she's able to see things that are helpful and beneficial to me that I can't see myself. Sometimes I'm offended when she says it, I'm upset because I've got this under control, but a lot of times I don't. And her words could ultimately be a lifesaver. So here, Yelsa's watching her husband go at this. He's not going at it. She's watching her husband be deconstructed. But she says, listen, find out why he's here, give him what he needs, and send him on his way. So Amalei, my shiate demar hacha. So Rav Nachman says, Rav Yehuda Bar Cheskel, what brings you? Tell me, so nice of you to stop by, right? What brings you? Amalei, taska da hazmanasa. What brings me? You summoned me to Beis Din. Amalei hashta shusa demar lo gamirna. Taska da hazmanusa mishadran lamar. So Rav Nachman says, Rav Yehuda, I don't even know how to speak correctly in your presence. You think I would summon you to my Beis Din? So apik diska da hazmanusa mi bechaje va'achsilei. So Rabbi Yehuda Bar Cheskel takes out the hazman, he takes out the summons. Amar lei hagavra v'hadiska. The man is here, and here's the document. So we'll say. So the Maharsha points out over here, either Rav Nachman forgot about it, or it was also possible that Rav Nachman ran a Beis Din. He might have been the Av Beis Din. Just because the Av Beis Din doesn't mean that he was in charge of every single hazmana. So it is possible that the Beis Din of Rav Nachman summoned Rav Yehuda Bar Cheskel, and Rav Nachman was unaware of it. That is possible. So what happens? So the Gemara says, Amrle, hol v'asr halachacha, l'shtayim mile ki echi dulo lemre mechanfi rabbanan adadi. So Rav Nachman says essentially this, Rabbi Yehuda bar Yecheskel, the truth is, I would have never summoned you into my Beis Din. But now, once you're here, let's adjudicate the case, right? Because otherwise, what's going to happen? People are going to say, oh, you see, the rabbis, they give each other a pass, right? It's like a boys' club, right? They take care of each other. So in order to avoid that, if you're already here and you already received the hazmana, let's adjudicate the case. Amrle, my time shamte mar lahu gavra. So let's go back. So now they go through the case. So remember again, how did this whole thing start? Rabbi Yehuda bar Yecheskel went ahead and excommunicated the guy who spoke disparagingly about him in the butcher shop, right? He called Rabbi Yehuda bar Yecheskel, Yehuda bar Sheviskel, called him a glutton. So again, he excommunicated him. So I asked Rav Nachman, Rabbi Yehuda, why did you excommunicate him? Tzir shlicha d'Rabbanan. Because again, he mistreated a shaliach of a Talmid Chacham. In other words, he disparaged me in the presence of my shaliach. So he mistreated the shaliach. So Rav Nachman says, but one second, v'nag deimar, why didn't you just have him flogged? In other words, why did you excommunicate him? Why don't you give him lashes? Rav used to give lashes for anyone who would treat the shaliach of a Talmid Chacham disparagingly, to which Rabbi Yehuda responded, "Da'avdif mine avdile." No, I felt he had to be dealt with in a more stringent fashion. Okay, my time achriz marale da'avd. We'll both say first white line. Why did you announce about him that he's an eved, that he's a slave? So the Gemara says, "Amrle deragel dekari inshi avdi," because this guy went around calling everyone an eved. Betani, and we learned kalaposel pasel ve'inu adar b'shiv chali olav. Amr Shmuel b'mumo posel, because we learned about say anyone who pasels everyone else is himself pasel. He doesn't see the good in the world at all. And Shmuel said, not only is he pasel, but the very thing he says about everyone else is the very thing that is broken inside of him. I will say, once again, that same yisod, it's so important. I will say, it's a fascinating exercise to engage in. Baal Shem exercise, because when you get upset and you see something broken in someone else, pause and ask, is that broken inside of me? Is this person my mirror? You see something bad in the world, right? Ultimately, again, is that my mirror? Is there something negative that I'm seeing reflect? Is there something negative in myself that I'm seeing reflected back at me from what I see in the behavior of others or what I see in the world in general? So the Gemara says, Eimadam Shmuel. So therefore, Rabbi Yehuda bar Yecheskel says, listen, says Shmuel says, anyone who pasels everyone else himself is pasel, and the thing that he pasels everyone else with is the very thing that he himself is pasel with. So therefore, I announced that he's an aved. So Rav Nachman said, one second, so now Rav Nachman said, listen, I know that Shmuel said this, but maybe, did Shmuel actually mean that you should make an announcement about the guy that he's an eved? Maybe Shmuel meant to say, you have to be choshesh. You have to be choshesh. It's possible that this guy is an eved, but did Shmuel actually mean to say that halacha l'maisa again, you have to announce that he's an eved? Okay, so what happened? So listen to this. So what happened? While they were having this out, the litigant, the other guy, the butcher shop guy, walked into the Beis Din. Let's say, by the way, I also just want to point out, it is interesting to note that sometimes the worst breaches of midos happens in stores when people have to wait online, right? It is an interesting idea, right? People lose it. They lose it in dramatic ways. They lose it with other people, and then the cashier often gets the brunt of all of this. And meanwhile, you're not the only person in the store. There are other people, and they may have gotten to the line ahead of you, and people don't always act as quickly as you want them to act, or do exactly as well. You're in a rush. That's your problem. That's not the rest of the world's problem. And as an aside, so Gemara says, what happens? Now watch this. So the butcher shop guy shows up, and again, Rav Nachman was going through this whole thing, and the guy is incensed. He says, "Can you believe the chutzpah? Rabbi Yehuda bar Yecheskel called me an eved. I myself trace my lineage to the Chashmonaim, to the Hasmonean line. To the Hasmonean line, right? Amar lei. So Rabbi Yehuda bar Yechezkel says, Chashmonaim, is it right? Interesting. You know, by the way, Amar Shmuel, Haki Amar Shmuel, called the Amar mi beis Chashmonai kasina avdahu. You know, by the way, that anyone who goes ahead and traces themselves back to the Chashmonai family is an Eved. Right? They will say is an Eved. Right, so again, so just find out what's happened over here, right? So the guy comes along, right? And the guy says, Rabbi Yehuda bar Yechezkel called me an Eved, a chutzpah, Eved. I am royalty. So Rabbi Yehuda quotes Shmuel, who says, by the way, anyone who says that he's from the house of the Chashmonaim is an Eved. Now both say, Amar lei. So Rav Nachman hears this, and he says as follows: Amar lei, lo savar lamar lahad Amar Rabbi Abba Amar Rav Huna Amar Rav, kol tam tchacham shemora halachu ba. Im kodem ma'isa amra shomen lo, ve'im lav ein shomen lo. So both say, now listen to this. Now what happened in the midst of all this? So in general, the halacha is like this. No one ever heard this halacha of Shmuel before. So I will say, in general, when you introduce a new halacha that no one ever heard before, if you introduce it in the middle of a situation that benefits you, we don't listen to you. Which makes sense because, now suddenly you found the new halacha. I mean, people do this all the time, right? I found the new halacha, right? What's the source? Don't worry about it. But that, right? It's Sinai. I got it directly from Sinai. Right? So when you introduce new information that no one ever had before, then halacha, and in the situation, we don't believe you. But if you introduce it, unless you have independent corroboration, if you introduce it before and it's established, then you can introduce it in this context as well. So both say, here's the problem. Rav Yehuda bar Yechezkel just introduced this halacha from Shmuel that said if you go ahead and you claim that you're from the Chashmonai family, you're an Eved. So no one ever heard this before. So Rav Yehuda bar Yechezkel says, Amar lei, ha'ika Rav Masna tekai kavasi. Rav Masna holds like me. Ask Rav Masna, he'll corroborate it. But say, get ready for this. Rav Masna lo chazi le'narda tleisar shani. So we'll say, Rav Nachman had not come to Narda. He had not been in Narda for 13 years. Ahu Yoma Asa. That day, who shows up in Narda? Rav Masna. Amar lei. So it's Rav Masna. Wait 1 second. Bechir mar my Amar Shmuel ki kai chad kara aguda v'chad kara b'mavra. So Rabbi Yehuda bar Yechezkel says to Rav Masna, Rav Masna, do you remember what Shmuel said that day when he had one leg on the ground on land and one leg in the ferry? I'll say, I can't remember yesterday, right? Like you remember what Shmuel said that day? I mean, yeah, sure. Amar lei, Amar Shmuel, called the Amar midbeis Chashmonai Malko Kasina Avdahu. Yeah, Shmuel, that day? No, that day, sure. Shmuel said, whoever said they are a descendant from the Chashmonaim is an Eved. Why? Because remember, again, I'll say a little bit of background. There was a slave of the Chashmonai family by the name of Hordus, by the name of Herod. Herod wiped out the entire Chashmonai family and then asserted himself ultimately again as a member of the royal line. He spared the life of one girl, of one woman who he wanted to marry. This girl went ahead and went up to the roof, and she called out. She said, I am the last surviving member of the Chashmonai family. After me, whoever claims that they are a member of the Chashmonaim, ultimately they're really a slave. And with that, she threw herself down to her death. So therefore, again, the Gemara says, and she says, called the Amar Miras Chashmonai ana avdahu, nafla me'igra umisa. So Rabbi says, so sure enough, again, there was now independent corroboration, ultimately, again, of this statement of Rabbi Yehuda bar Yechezkel. So Rabbi say, after all this, Achros alav da'avdahu. So now we'll say, not only did Rabbi Yehuda bar Yechezkel announce that this guy was an Eved, but what else? Rav Nachman's Beis Din now also put out an official proclamation, this guy is an Eved. So the Gemara says, Hahu Yoma, listen to this. This is incredible. Hahu Yoma, Akaran Kama Ksuvasa Benarda. They will say, Nebach, this is actually tragic. This guy had married children. Well, the problem is, after it got out, that's what? That he was an Eved, so obviously many people, it affected all of the marriages of his children. It should both say such a profound idea once again, who we are and what we are and the type of personalities we create for ourselves, Rabbi say there are generational ripple effects. What we do, how we live, how we conduct ourselves is not just limited to us, but ultimately, again, it finds its ripple effects in our children's lives, our children's married lives as well. So Nebuch, many marriages were broken as a result of this event. So Kika Nafik, so we'll say, now watch this. Let's finish up. We'll say Kika Nafik. So we'll say now what's happening over here is Rav Yehuda bar Yechezkel is leaving the Beis Din of Rav Nachman. Nafki Abasrei Lemirgeme. The townspeople were ready to stone Rav Yehuda bar Yechezkel. Rabbi will say now why? Because understand, it wasn't just about Guy, butcher shop guy, right? Butcher shop guy, right? He's done. But now remember again, butcher shop guy who knows how many kids he had, right? So all of those kids' marriages are impacted, grandchildren, and again, scandal, as they say, right? Scandal, like this is big stuff. Big stuff. So watch this. Now Rav Yehuda bar Yechezkel was a force to be reckoned with. So look what he says. Amar le, ishasiku shasiku. Here's my suggestion to you. Close your mouths. If you close your mouths, I'll go home in peace and leave you guys alone. V'ilo, but if not, maglina alaychu, I'll reveal other genealogical issues within Narda. Hada Amr Shmuel, Tartin Zarisa Ika Benarda. There are two strings of family, two lines, two familial lines in Narda. Chada Mikra de Beyona, one of them are called the Yona family. V'chada Mikra de Bey Orvasi, and one of them is the Raven family. And I both said the truth is those aren't their actual names, the Maharshal says, because otherwise he's revealing it right now. But he's saying one of them is the Yona family, one of them is the Raven family. V'simanich, right? And ultimately, what's the siman? Tameh, tahar, tahar. The Yona family, they're genealogically pure. The Raven family, impure. So Gemara says, at that point he says, listen guys, here's the deal. I got more on you, right? I have more genealogical information about the people of Narda, and you think you're in trouble now. Wait until I reveal this information. So we'll say, what do they do with their stones? Shaju alahu rigma me'adayu veka'atma benar malka. So we'll say, they took their stones, and ultimately again, they threw it into Nar Malka. And I will say, just to show you how many stones there were, they stopped up River Malka River. In other words, they were ready to rain down. This is going to be shock and awe upon Rabbi Yehuda bar Yechezkel. But once he went ahead and he said, I've got a lot on you guys, they said, you know what? Let's let him go. Now, we're going to stop over here for today. A lot to, by both say, next couple of days, incredible and overwhelming, beautiful Gemara. Now, I will say, there's also what to talk about with this because there's further discussions in general about the need to discover genealogical impurities, or kind of do we just let things go? So we'll talk about that a little bit more tomorrow. We'll say, incredible beginning of the week, tremendous shkoyach, have a great day. All right, Chevron Zoom, shkoyach everyone. Have a great day. Birthday boy.
That was incredible. I'm going to have to review that twice.
Right?
And then I'm going to have to discuss some stuff with you. There was some stuff that were like relevant to me now.
Incredible.
It was incredible.
Right?
And also,
and it's